Hi, I'm Dr. Mindy Maycant. I'm a professor of religious studies and the director of the Living Well Center for Vocation and Purpose at Lenoir-Rhyne University. We have with us today Mr. Jim Wallis, who is a globally respected writer, teacher, preacher, and an advocate for justice. He is the founder, the president, and the editor-in-chief of Sojourners and the author of several books. This series asks speakers to address the question of what makes for a life worth living in their experience. And I have asked Jim to join us today, particularly in light of an upcoming election and a heated kind of political environment and year, to speak to the question of what makes for a life worth living, but in the particular context of how faith and political life intersect for him. So, Jim, thank you very much for being with us.
Mindy, I'm glad to be with you today.
And so, for you, what does make for a life worth living, particularly when you go to the polls in a few months?
Well, the only blessing of the COVID time for our family was both my boys have been home together with Joy and I for several months now. One just graduated from college in our living room this spring, and the other is a rising senior in high school, and so he's been home the whole time too. They've had a lot of good time together, but they're both at that place where they're thinking about their future and what they're going to do. One's a recent college grad, the other is about to start college, and so these have been dinner time conversations. Your question for us for several months.
Right.
What makes a life worth living? And what they think is they see a lot of people just thinking about their life and their career in very individualistic ways. How can I get a job? How can I have a family? How can I be financially secure? How can I? It's like my path, my sort of personal path. And they think that is not a life worth living. They think a life worth living is one that impacts the world around you, that impacts others around you, that a life that is lived for others is really they're trying to figure out majors and focus and this and that. But finally, a life just lived for yourself and maybe your family, they think isn't a life worth living. I think they're right. So what does that mean? When I do a course at Georgetown on faith, and it's called Faith, Race, and Politics. And I do that not because I believe in sharing information, which I do a lot, but I want to be part of the formation of these young students who are going to make or could make a great difference in the world. And because they're Georgetown students, people are going to look to them for really fitting into the systems,
Right.
I worked at Harvard before that, and it's like, where are they going to fit in the systems? And I said, this is my last lecture at the end of every course. I say, this is a lecture not on career, but on vocation. They're very different. Career is about your assets, your resume, and how you can get on the highest step of a ladder to success right out of college. Vocation is about your calling, and whether you're religious or not, you don't have to be religious. But what is your gift? What do you mean a gift? Well, what's down deep? What do you lose track of time when you're doing? What are you really, really good at? And how do your gifts connect with the crying needs of the world? Your vocation, right? That intersection. And I said, I'll say, you all are smart. I've learned that in 13 weeks, but you're too smart to just fit into the systems or even lead the systems. you have an opportunity to change those systems. And that's where we are now. So when Donald Trump and federal forces tear gassed peaceful protesters outside the White House, cleared them away to go to the St. John's Church and hold his Bible upside down. It wasn't his Bible, he said a Bible. I'm not sure he has his Bible, but a Bible upside down, which was ironic because, well, I'll just leave it at that. It was upside down. Bishop Miriam Buddy of the Episcopal Church asked me to join her for a prayer vigil 2 days later in the streets outside St. John's. So despite all the COVID in the air and social distancing and people being afraid to come, I understand all that, and I'm 72, but there's no way I wasn't going to do that, buddy. And so Sojourners in the Episcopal Church had this vigil. It was in the streets, it was chaos, and the police wouldn't let us near St. John's. The military was up and their shields and their, and of course I've been in those situations frequently. So some of the church leaders said, I'm glad you're here to know what to do in a situation like this, because it was crazy. It was crazy. And how the police moved us out of the way of St. John's, up the street to 16th Street, no sound systems, and thousands of young people in the street, thousands.
Wow.
Totally diverse, all kind of young people. And what I learned was even young kids who maybe aren't even churched or go to church still know all the words to Amazing Grace. So the sweet sounds of Amazing Grace are in the air with police, violence, military, COVID, and all that. So I loved it. And my boys were they're both athletes. They were trying to muscle me some social distance. We didn't do real well with that. But then they kept going back down, and then it got turned into Black Lives Matter Plaza. And they said, Dad, you gotta come back. And I went down there, and here's this whole now creation of this place. The military had been pushed out by Mayor Bowser, and police are now mingling with the crowds, kind of hanging out and talking. But it's a whole conversation. There's music, there's movement, there's Black Lives Matter banners outside the church around the place, and it's named Black Lives Matter Plaza. And so they said, Dad, your smile through that mask is just so visible. I was wearing. So what they do now is they go down there with their friends and their bikes, and they talk about what they're going to do with their lives in that place, their vocations, what they want to change, what difference they want to make. And I tell my students, this is about vocation, not career. Career is easy, but vocation is about connecting who you are at your deepest level, your gifts, with the pain and suffering that's in the world right now. So getting very practical. And to me, what makes my life living is doing that every day, is making those decisions every day. Someone asked me recently about what my spiritual discipline is. It's kept me going. I had an interview yesterday with this young student, with a bunch of students, and they said, we've been doing this for 5 weeks. So we want to talk to somebody who's been doing it for 5 decades. So could you tell us what keep going past 5 weeks to 5 decades? And I said, well, for me, it's my newspaper in one hand, or the media in one hand, and my Bible in the other. Always connected to what we're seeing, what we're doing, what's going on, and how that relates to faith, what the Bible says, what Jesus said. Did he mean it? I think he did. What does that mean for us now? It's that conversation every day. And so you asked about right now, if this was a safe, free, and fair election, there's no doubt what the outcome would be. Donald Trump would lose, no doubt. But because of that, it literally is true from the facts. The White House and the Republican Party is trying to steal the election by suppressing Black votes. So Sojourners is a campaign called Lawyers and Collars, 9 key states, collars, clergy with lawyers to protect the black vote.
Wow.
Clergy on the phone. We're doing Wisconsin tomorrow night. We've done all these states training Sojourners and the National African American Clergy Network, run by Barbara Williams Skinner, who's on our board. And so we're practicing, and if in fact black votes turn out and are protected at the same level of Obama year votes for black voters, that decides the election right there. So we're working on that prep. The other thing we're doing is every year at election time, people say, what are the religious issues? And the religious right, conservative white Christians, and the media say, well, they're abortion, gay marriage, and religious liberty. Well, now the situation has changed because of what's happening on the ground. So in the middle of COVID, when we were all watching, we're at home, people essential workers had to go out and risk their lives every day. But a lot of people, we weren't doing sports at night and watching games, we were watching. And all of a sudden in Minneapolis, this white police knee got put on the black neck of George Floyd for 8 minutes and 46 seconds. Having put my old knee down for that long in a lot of streets in the last several months, it's a long time. 8 minutes and 46 seconds got us talking about 401 years. My book, America's Original Sin, in 2015 is coming back to all the shelves now. And I haven't heard that phrase more in my life, America's Original Sin, than I have in the last 6 weeks, right? So when that knee went down on George Floyd's neck, every black parent saw their sons and daughters under that knee, or themselves. My parents did, but somehow watching that, there've been other videos before, as you know, but watching that one made us watch and listen and talk about 401 years. So this is very bold, but I think this year, the religious issue in the election should be racism. That's the primary religious issue in this election, and that's spreading around the country. And so not only do we protect black votes, but we begin to peel off white votes. And we talk about voting racism out at every level. And John Lewis, whose funeral is going on right now as we speak, watching out of the corner of my eye, my friend and mentor, and the only politician I ever let hold one of my kids was John Lewis. And so Luke, who's now a college graduate and now a first job paid field organizer in Pennsylvania for the election, was being held by John Lewis, right? And John said the most important nonviolent tool we have is the vote. He gave his life for voting rights. And so practically, my life is going to mean a lot if I can protect votes, vulnerable votes. This will help with that. And if I can help people to see that racism is the religious issue of this campaign.
Thank you. Can I ask one follow-up question? How do we create a space where we form the virtues necessary to live the life that you're talking about? I mean, you describe your boys as if that just happens, and it doesn't just happen. So something happened so that the kids that you raised have these virtues as a part of who they are. How do we create that world so that and what are the virtues that we would be looking for? But then even maybe more importantly, how do we get from here to there?
You said spaces, and that's a really important word here. We're often in spaces that are just very sociological. We're just predictable sociologically. And our spaces are sort of determined by racialized geography, which is the purpose of it is to keep us in spaces where we'll never learn. Mm-hmm. On a Detroit radio show this morning, and this guy called in and said, Black Lives Matter is a bunch of bunk and all this stuff about it. I said, so Brad, I used to be a little league coach for both my boys. I had black players I coached and white players. Every black kid I ever coached, every black kid, had his or her dad or mom have the talk about how to behave in the presence of a white police officer, how to protect yourself. No white parents ever had that talk. So I said, every black parent tells that to their kid and can tell stories of racial policing. Brad, is that bunk? Do you think all black parents are lying and making this up? Is that bunk? And I said, well, Brad, the problem is you don't know any black people. Or you don't know any black people who tell you the truth about their experience. And the next caller was this guy named George, who said, yeah, I had this experience and that experience. He's a white guy too. And it really taught me that we gotta wake up here. Now, it's all bunk if you're in your space that just repeats your assumptions day in and day out. But I've learned most about the world from being places I wasn't supposed to be, and meeting and being with people I was never supposed to know or become. I hear their stories, like dads too, but moms. Watching as a coach and a parent, boys. When moms talk about the future of their kids, their hopes, their dreams, their fears, it's a deeply bonding thing. Dads too, but I think moms get deeper. But that's not hardly happening across racial lines. If it was, we'd be a different country. Spaces. Who's in our spaces? Who do we know? Who do we listen to and talk to? When Barack Obama was elected on that cold election day, we had Vincent Harding staying with us, who was in the inner circle of Dr. King's Southern movement. Vincent Harding, great historian, his books are all on my shelf, a mentor of mine. And so Uncle Vincent, who in our house was Uncle Vincent, wanted to go to the inauguration with us. And my two boys got to stand alongside, all bundled up, Uncle Vincent to hear and see the inauguration and let him reflect on what that means historically. So who's in your spaces? Who are you listening to? Who are you relating to? That really makes a lot of difference.
Thank you. That actually makes sense. That makes perfect sense. Well, I know you have a very busy schedule, and so I want to just thank you so much for taking time to talk with me today. It's an honor, and I look forward to talking to you more. Thank you.
Well, that's the right question that you're asking. What makes you, what is successful, or what is meaningful? And my boys want to, have a successful life and all that, but they're asking what would make my life mean something.
Right.
So keep asking that question. And I think this new generation really wants to ask that question.
I think
more.
You're right. I think you're
so
right.
I'm encouraging them to think about their vocations and not just their potential careers.
Thank you very much.
All right. Thank you.